Greetings and welcome to episode number 15 of the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast. As always, I am your host, Chris Hales, and today I am joined by a co-host, a friend of the show, and a guest before, Parker Robinson. And
glad to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. You know what? I am too tired to do the show myself today.
I understand. It's feeling like definitely a Friday.
Yeah, it is a Friday, and it's been a very long week. I know that both of us are pretty fried.
Yeah.
It's been quite the week. We worked together. So yeah, Parker, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite. I had a blast last time.
Yeah, and for those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast is a show that features your original classical guitar music. And all you have to do to have your music featured on the show is simply send an MP3 recording to Chris at classicalguitarcomposers.com. And as long as it includes an audio recording of nylon string guitar, it's on this show. It does not need to pass any other qualifications, but I want a real guitar. And, if you're not composing for classical guitar, are you even listening to this show?
You're calling them out.
Right.
You're saying, hey, this is niche, and we're keeping it niche. All right, so bug off.
Yeah. Well, please listen.
No.
Don't bug off too much.
I got you. I'm just.
Yeah, no. Don't send me your bluegrass tune. That's really cool. I mean, you can send it to me, but I can't. I'm not going to put it on the show. But
that's for the Bluegrass Composers Guitar Podcast. That'll be the next podcast.
I'm putting that out next year. Stay tuned. We're going to get straight into it today. It's actually been a slow month. I have no new submissions, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because for all of those who are sending music, I don't want it to necessarily be you send the music, it's heard one time, and we all move on. I actually would like to revisit pieces from time to time. I'd eventually like to cycle back through all of them. I really enjoy these pieces, and I'm going to enjoy coming back and revisiting them. And so we're going to do one of those today.
As oftentimes you should do with music, you know. One time listen, has its benefits for sure, but there's a lot more to dig into oftentimes.
Yeah. A new day, a new episode, and not necessarily a new piece today, but a new conversation with my friend Parker, who is not a classical guitarist, not a guitarist, period, I would say.
Nope, not at all.
Guitar chops are pretty awful.
Yeah.
But I like having you on the show, and here's the reason why, is this show is primarily a composition and guitar show. However, just as much, this show involves recording. And I do not know a better engineer than Parker Robinson.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah, last time we had you on the show, we talked a little bit about recording techniques, and I'd like to just maybe revisit some of that conversation.
Yeah, sure.
And I think we could maybe get a little deeper into it, and also talk about, I know we've recorded together recently, and I think you pulled some pretty amazing sounds out of the guitar. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that. And granted, we were working in a professional studio with high-grade stuff, but nonetheless...
The principles translate kind of regardless of where you are and what you're using.
Yeah, the concepts are the same.
Exactly.
So, I'd like to talk about some of that.
Good practices, like in the same argument that you'd make that like good technique, good practice equates good music, and there's obviously a threshold in terms of how expensive your instrument is, right? Like, do you need is the most expensive instrument going to yield the best results? And it almost always dials down to technique and theory. Right?
Exactly.
Same thing applies with technology and recording, certainly.
That's a perfect analogy. Manuel Barrueco is going to take a $50 piece of junk guitar, and he's going to just shred through Albanas on it.
Right.
And it's going to sound so much better than me playing a $2,000 guitar.
Yeah. I'm my roots are in jazz and saxophone, and there's lots of stories of guys in the day pawning their saxophone, for alcohol, and then going to, so they kind of have a pawned saxophone that goes in and out of the pawn shops. Nothing really fancy about it, but man, can they shred and can they play? And, so
Yeah,
I
perfect
believe
analogy.
pretty heavily in the concept of good technique, good principle, and then, we're fortunate that we have access to a lot of really great equipment and gear, which is certainly an added benefit, but maybe not as required as you would think. Mainly, I guess, not a deterrent for people trying to get their art out. That's the biggest thing, right? If the concern is I don't know how to do this, or I don't have X, Y, or Z in terms of gear, don't let that be a stifling, measure to produce stuff.
I'm relieved to hear you say that, because as someone who I make all kinds of recordings, frequently,
Right.
I don't necessarily go and use the stuff that is at our disposal. I like to work in my basement.
Yeah.
And I feel like I am able to get a pretty good product out from my basement, and I feel a little more confident just hearing you say that.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
Because sometimes I'm like, well, I think it sounds good, but
yeah, no, I got you.
I know it could be picked apart.
Well, there's an air of skepticism that comes with it too.
Yeah.
We've worked together long enough that that, like, even when we're in the middle of it and you and I are looking at each other going like, this sounds pretty great. Deep down inside, I'm going like, you're terrible at this. This sucks.
Yeah.
And I gotta sleep
that.
on it. I gotta come back the next day and then kind of dig into it and rip it apart and go like, okay, yeah.
I need to go listen to this somewhere else. Make sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. My first earliest recordings, like my very first ones, I think are pretty good, because it was one of them little handheld tape recorders.
Right.
That they have like this, I don't know, the thing's about a foot long and 6 inches wide, and half of that is the speaker.
Yeah.
And they have a really cool sound when you record, some guitars. It's very raw sounding. It sounds like you recorded it 80 years ago, and it's just got a cool thing.
Yeah.
But as I graduated I bought this digital recording studio, this little Boss
I know what you're talking
thing,
about.
and I learned the ins and outs of it. It was a pretty awesome thing, but I didn't know. I had no idea what I was doing. This is when I was like 20 years old. Right. And I played in this band, and we recorded on it. And, I love my band and what we were doing, and we had a lot of fun, but the recording quality is atrocious because we had no idea what we were doing in terms of recording. I now think that I could take that same technology, and I really wish I could go back in time with just some of the knowledge I have now.
Right.
And use the exact same equipment. I think I could have made us a much better recording.
Yeah, no, I got you. There's a lot.
I'm embarrassed in terms of its quality that way.
That's always the case.
But
yep.
What can you do? Hey, before we get too far into it, I would like to read this email. It's part of the show. I like to read when people send in emails.
Oh, okay.
This is from Andrew Aylward. Andrew was featured on the show, I think he says, from episode 6. And I, of course, remember Andrew, and I was glad to hear from him again. He's responding to the previous episode. He says, Chris, hi, I just want to let you know that this major/minor question is something that I think about often when I am writing music. In your last episode, I was really happy to find out I am not the only one. When I first started writing my own music, I tended to favor writing in a minor key since it seemed easier to make something that sounded convincing and that people would take seriously. Since then, I have really had to force myself to write something in a major key and still find it hard to come up with good ideas. I've been continuing to follow every episode. Keep up the good work. I am hoping to record something shortly that will make it to a future episode if you are still looking for new material. Best regards, Andrew, from episode 6. So Andrew's responding to, in the previous episode, talked a bit about writing in major versus minor, and we don't need to go all the way back into that, but thank you for that, Andrew, very much. Thanks for responding, and I do think that's an interesting idea of what goes through different composers' heads, and is this even on their radar? I want to add something to that. I heard on the radio this story about Tchaikovsky wrote the suite for orchestra, and when he finished, he realized that every single piece he wrote was in 4/4. And I guess I don't know this piece. That's just what I heard on the radio. But so he actually pulled one of the movements and put in this waltz just to add some variance. So Tchaikovsky had thoughts like this.
Yeah.
So why can't we?
Yeah.
And Andrew, I think today we will refeature your piece from episode 6. and we will look forward to hearing that at the end of the episode. And if any of you are listening and want to jump in and comment on anything, you can also send an email to Chris at classicalguitarcomposers.com.
That's really cool, by the way.
What's that?
For the people listening, it's worth knowing, Chris has told me nothing about what we're talking about today, and I didn't know that. Well, it makes sense, but like just reading an email from a listener, that's really cool. You know, having some back and forth and dialogue about you know, the things that you're addressing and talking about. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. I like I enjoy talking with the listeners, and yeah.
Yeah.
Lost my train of thought. In fact, yeah, we haven't talked at all about what we're going to do today, other than I said I told you I wanted to talk a little more about recording. And even just on the fly here, we decided to do the podcast now all at once with Parker as a co-host rather than an interview shoehorned into the podcast.
Right.
And
just winging it.
Yeah, we're just winging it. So anyway, should we talk some recording?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, we recently recorded a couple of shows featuring acoustic guitar, and I really liked the sound you were getting out of these guitars. And one show we recorded had some classical guitar in it, and I just wanted you to talk maybe a little bit about what you did for miking and how you utilized the room we had, what went into those decisions, and so forth.
So, to give context maybe about what the guitar, like the recordings were for, Chris and I work for a company that makes accompaniment tracks for Broadway musicals, and it's really cool because we benefit from working in any genre you could imagine, really. And so oftentimes we're trying to find like a good neutral base to record things, but then we also try to, you know, emphasize for style different options. I think one of the things we were running into, we just moved, the company just moved to a different studio space. I guess that would have been in September?
Yeah, something like that.
September. And
it was still warm at the time.
It was still warm, yeah. And yeah, that's a good point. We remembered things at the office by whether it's freezing cold or really warm. We're in Utah, so it's extremely hot in the summers and extremely cold in the winters. Our previous
there are
studio,
people in Canada rolling their eyes
I know,
at
exactly.
that right now, but I don't care.
Exactly. I'm sure
we're freezing.
There are many of you who have it way worse. Okay, I'm not trying to minimize your thing. Okay. In our previous studio space, it was a very like baseline kind of functional room. It's a business park that had been kind of repurposed for a studio. The things that become a struggle when you're recording, but especially things that are acoustic or very live and dynamically on the softer side. Acoustic guitar is a good example of something like that. Dialogue is a good example of that. Oftentimes, a problem that you'll run into is your noise floor. Essentially, how loud is the environment you're recording in versus the instrument that you're recording. So in our previous studio, it was okay, usable for a very long time. We were there for years and made it work. And what spurred the necessity for us to move from that studio is our neighbors next door there was some type of manufacturer for airplane parts, I think. Allegedly. We still don't really know. At some point, they bought like a hydrosonic press. You know, like I never actually saw it, but from the name, I'm assuming it's one of those things that like will cut metal using a stream of water. You know,
I think so.
I think that's what it is. Really, really.
For us, it meant this very high-pitched, nasally whine coming through the vents all day long,
through the wall, through the vents.
Yeah, with about like 20-second pauses, 20 seconds of nasal.
It became. It was a deal breaker. It just was ruining our workflow, and we had to like record 20 seconds at a time and try to like kind of bob and weave around this press, and that
let's just say it, that the neighbors were pricks.
Yeah, the neighbors were very difficult to deal with as well. They initially said that they were going to be running it for like a single 2-week period, and then ended up being like pretty much 8 to 5, like 4 days a week.
Not once did we ever ask them not to run it. We just asked when they would be running it so we could work around it.
Yeah, and Anyway, so the hydrosonic press, that represents the worst case scenario that required, like, that was the last straw that kind of required us to move, because it was going to be probably a permanent thing for them. So one of the benefits of us moving is that we moved to a different location that is much better suited as a recording facility. There's a lot more isolation in terms of what our tracking room sounds like in our control room. And because of that, we were able to implement some different recording techniques that I would have liked to have done all the time at our previous studio, but really couldn't get away with. So we were recording acoustic guitar on a show that was, I guess it was kind of rocky, rock-ish, Broadway rock-ish music, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily relevant.
Can we say what it is?
I don't know. I don't know why we wouldn't be able to. I don't know.
I mean, there's no reason we couldn't.
We don't, yeah.
It just hasn't been officially released yet, is the thing.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to say this. It's a horror movie musical.
It's a horror movie musical
and
that has kind of like contemporary, like Broadway-ish style rock music to it.
It's pretty cool. Very much. I dig it.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Chris and I, we typically work on different phases. Like Chris does a lot of work in like the beginning and middle section, pre-production, middle production. And we're all spread out throughout the whole process, but in terms of where we do a lot of the bulk of our work, I didn't hear anything from this show until it got ready to record. So on this particular show, I didn't do anything in pre-production. When it landed in the studio for bookings for recording, that's the first I heard it. And by then, I guess you already really kind of dug it and were excited to be able to record guitars for it.
I couldn't wait. I heard the original Broadway cast recordings for tempo reference.
Right.
And so just setting the tempos, I got familiar with the music. Yeah, I really liked the show.
And this show had two guitar books. Right? Yeah.
Two
guitar books, and
cool.
Both books had electric guitar and acoustic guitar.
Yeah, it called for 12-string, steel string, and nylon.
Yeah. And both playing some pretty cool electric stuff as well.
It was some of the most fun guitar parts I've found.
Show was totally awesome. We all kind of fell in love with it, and this was one of the first times we were going to be recording. This was the first time we were recording acoustic guitar in our new studio environment, and so. We're using, and we typically use, two like small condenser diaphragm, small diaphragm condenser microphones. Those are the ones that kind of look like pencils, referred to as pencil condenser microphones, you know. And I'd like to use them in I'm not going to say every case, but in a lot of cases in what's called an XY pattern. Which, if you guys Google this, you'll be able to find it. If you Google microphone technique XY. You'll see a picture of this, but it's really just like the two capsules of the microphone lined up, one directly on top of the other in kind of a 90-degree angle. And the reason for that is you get a stereo recording, which is two sources or more. Two sources really is all you need for stereo, obviously. But because the capsules are lined up over each other, it's very phase coherent. And so it has a really... It's excellent at capturing kind of the natural sound of the instrument. You're not necessarily trying to get how it interacts with the room. But because we're in a new studio and the noise floor is so low, we don't have busy neighbors, we don't have to have air conditioner running. The noise floor, just the sound of the room is so low, I was able to back those microphones away from the guitar pretty significantly. In our older place, we'd have to be hugged up pretty close on the guitar.
So you'd still favor the XY, just closer to the guitar.
Yeah, typically.
Okay.
And sometimes I'd split it to what's called a space pair, which is really the two microphones spaced out about 18 inches apart. And one would be, when you're close miking, you can get away with... The dangers of close miking is that you pick up the sound of the instrument being played more. So, like, you're going to get more... noise of the fingers on the frets and the picking of the strings, and depending on the genre and the style, that might be exactly what you want.
Some people like that.
Yeah. And it may be totally appropriate.
I like a tasteful amount myself.
Yeah.
But if you imagine if you're at a guitar recital, you're not hearing those to the degree you are with close miking and compression and stuff.
The good argument to make is especially with something like guitar, at no point are you sticking your head 8 inches from the guitar to listen and enjoy. So it seems like, and when I say that, it kind of seems like a no duh. So it seems like an odd thing that we would record that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the player, often, from the player's perspective, you're very close. You're hearing a lot of these things, but it's not the same. So
yeah.
That being said, last time we talked about the need for close miking in recording it in home. Which
the reason we were close miking more closely previously was to get more rejection of the room of the environment,
right?
So we could emphasize the sound of the guitar. So,
which I'm also doing to be clear, like I record this way at home.
Yeah,
I record in my basement. The mic's close, so it's not a bad thing, Parker.
That's a good emphasis to make.
I'm saying that's not what Parker's saying.
Yeah. Yes.
But we are talking about the problems you have to try to overcome.
The biggest thing I think when it comes to the aspects of production that are like recording, editing, mixing and recording, certainly everything that is said can have like this caveat of it depends, because it really, really does, right? Like,
it's your answer for everything.
It pretty much is. I learned that when I was in college. The first day of recording Studio One, right? The teacher stood up and said, I'm so excited you guys are here. And his name's Bart Scher. Bart, if you're listening, I don't know if he ever would be. I don't know if he's a guitarist, but Bart Scher's the man. I love that guy. He just said, we're going to talk a lot about the nitty gritty of recording, and we're going to get into, the principles of acoustics and the physics of it. But when it comes to the artistic aspect of recording, right? Because it's a lot of technical stuff. It's, the type of microphone and the routing of it, all of it is pretty hands-on. But at the end of the day, it's supposed to facilitate a musical performance. So we were close miking in our older studio out of maybe necessity, and it's not to say that we were getting bad stuff out of those recordings either. It's just based on the type of show, the environment that you're in. There's a lot of arguments that you could make and can make and should make about what is the best practice for your project. That's the main thing. Because even the way that I preferred to record it for this time, just so to finish the visualization, with the XY pattern on the microphones, we were backed off from the guitar, I'd probably say 5-6 feet maybe.
Yeah.
And that has the potential to introduce a lot of room noise. We're in a very neutral sounding room thanks to our new tracking facility. And so it ends up being something that seems very, very natural in terms of it sitting in a mix. It kind of does a lot of the lifting for you, And then, so we actually have done, 3 different shows and different recordings now. Is it 3? 2? I guess it's 2.
Yeah.
And we did.
You and I have done 2.
Yeah,
with the guitars
in this new studio anyway.
You've had someone else come in.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So, and the 2 reasons to use those microphones in that setup, for me, would be to try to capture the most natural and organic sound of the guitar possible. And in the description of it, it kind of seems like that would be the no-duh approach. But there are some times when you might need more sound of pluck and struck. You want those things to be if you're playing recently I also did the recording for a traditional jazz band, a trad jazz band, playing a lot of 40s, 50s era, maybe even earlier, jazz stuff. And it was really, they live tracked, which I, number one, love. But it can be intimidating because there's a drum kit next to an acoustic bass, next to an acoustic guitar. They're sitting 3 feet from each other with no amplification, no bass amp, and so that required the closest guitar miking you could possibly imagine. And in that case, I was using a dynamic microphone very, very, very close to the guitar. And the dynamic microphone is used specifically because it's far more directional, and it can reject the sound of the other instruments in the room better. And in that case, as close as I could possibly be with a different type of microphone, much higher gain because it's a dynamic microphone, and it has, in concept, the exact opposite, approach than what we did.
The condenser is sucking in all the sound from around it, essentially.
Yeah, I think the condenser probably sucking in is a good way of describing it. I would think that I typically think of it as like the condenser, like, can see farther, can see more in the room.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But that's the other kind of caveat or, downhill slope for engineers, particularly engineers and producers use every nonsensical phrase you could imagine for music, right? We were just doing, Chris and I have been recording drum kit for this new round of shows, and it's been really, really awesome. But you say stuff like, that we're doing sound check, and it's like, the kick for me right now is sounding a little tubby, and I want it to sound more centered and tight, right? And we addressed that by changing the microphone position. That was it. We didn't swap the drum kit. We didn't swap the kit. We adjusted preamps. We adjusted microphones. And so you say things like, I'd like that to be warmer or brighter, or, I'd like this to be more centered, or I'd like this to be sweeter,
Last night, along those lines, because these are happening late at night.
Yeah, they have been recently.
Hence we're
late
so
night
loopy.
sessions.
I could not think of how to say to our drummer, I'm going to give you one bar in, or whatever. Like, I just
one
wanted
bar
to tell
count
him
off before his entrance.
Yeah, which you say, 800 times over the course of the session, but I guess I felt like I needed to say it in new ways or something, but it became the most cumbersome thing to say. You're going to hear 4 clicks and then play.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. So the vocabulary is really kind of a interesting, or not necessarily a hard thing, but yeah, the approaches between the recordings that we were doing and versus with this live tracking trad jazz band were like as polar opposite as you possibly could be. You know what I mean? Like there was nothing similar in terms of approach, but the idea was that you cater what is available to you and what's appropriate for what you're trying to achieve. And so in that sense, in this jazz band, the guitar is responsible. And in this type of setup, there might not be a piano, in which case the guitar in that type of jazz combo setting is responsible for doing almost all of the harmonic lifting. You know what I mean? The bass is going to be playing very centered around roots, fifths, traditional jazz stuff, and not going to be harmonically doing as much than more contemporary or modern jazz. And so the guitarist is doing a lot of lifting, but they're also doing like chunky,
right,
chugga chugga,
like smacking those strings.
Yeah, and the guy, he's a phenomenal guitarist, and he knows what genre he's playing in, and you watch him play, and you can tell he's like beating the crap out of his guitar to get this really signature old school sound. And so the microphone chosen, the technique chosen, was specifically to try to capture his vintage aesthetic with no amplification.
Cool.
It's polar opposite approach than like a nylon string classical guitar.
Right.
But the point being that neither of those approaches was necessarily better than the other. It's just it was the appropriate method for that project on that day in that room with that group. So there's very rarely things that I would say are like hands down the only way to do something when it comes to recording. And that opens up a lot of doors for people who are trying to record. Like, what you have is what you have, So if we had the benefit of using some really great gear in a controlled environment and getting sounds that we really liked, that sat well in the mix, that seemed really natural and organic. And then I used, an $80 microphone in a live setting with this guitarist, and it was just as relevant and just as useful,
Right. Going back to the nylon we recorded, what would you say the height was on those mics?
Oh, good point.
I know with close miking, you get extremely different results.
Yeah.
Based on height. And personally for me, I like it a little up pointing down at the guitar.
Yeah.
I found when I mic'd low, I was getting a very tubby sound. I was getting these.
There you go, tubby sound. Good use.
It is tubby. The very thumpy, almost airy bass tones, low frequencies, I should say. Not bass tones, but like low frequency mud getting in there. Bringing the mic up and pointing it downward a little bit just kind of gave me a little more sparkle to it and got rid of all that extra.
Yeah, sure. I can explain that too. So that kind of buildup of low or middle frequency stuff that's making it seem kind of tubby is called proximity effect. And I can actually demonstrate right now. So we're talking to these microphones. The closer I get to the microphone, like the more emphasized you're going to hear like those mid lows. And so that concept is called proximity effect, and it's real, not just for your voice, obviously. And so that's another, I'm glad you brought that up. The microphones we were using, you would think that they'd be just kind of like level with the guitar, pointed right at the guitar. But it's not necessarily the sound that I wanted. I didn't necessarily want exactly directional sound pointed directly at it, because if I'm sitting and you're sitting and you're playing guitar and I'm 5 feet away from you, my ears are going to be, 2-3 feet higher than your guitar. That's what I'm used to hearing. I'm not used to squatting 2 feet from the ground or 3 feet from the ground and listening. And so
I suppose so.
So the technique used is to be, those microphones were higher up. If we were standing, I'd probably say just under, I don't know, between your chest and your belly button, maybe. And not necessarily angled directly down facing the guitar, but still angled slightly down, maybe towards your chest, which is maybe right where the top of the guitar is. And the whole approach for that is to try to mitigate some of that proximity effect. Now, if we're 5 feet away, we're not going to be getting that. The proximity effect stuff is really for pretty close miking. And it's also one of the reasons why close miking a kick drum or a snare drum is awesome, because those are the tones that you want. You want to be close, and you want to hear the snap and crackle on that, and that's oftentimes how that's achieved. But to use more engineering terms, right, you're using tubby and low and mid and kind of bass up. You raise that up and you angle it a little bit. By going a little off axis, you emphasize a little bit more of the room tone and open up, maybe how would you describe, like an airiness to the tone that seems very, very natural. And that's exactly why that approach was used as well. And if you're trying to mic up a guitar or trying to mic up anything, and you're finding that you're close to the tone you want, or there's one thing that you want to address that you wish you could address, there is an argument now and kind of always to like, we can fix that in post. And now with all the recording technology we have, that's really is a thing. But, the changing of a microphone even an inch or 2 inches, or going, so like if you feel like you're too close or you're too boxy, you could go right 3 inches on the mic stand and then angle the microphone back towards the guitar. That's you getting less directional sound and more kind of off-shot sound. And like even small adjustments like that typically equate a pretty significant change in tone. So it also just comes down to a lot of experimentation. You record at home, and I've heard your recordings and they sound great because you know what your room sounds like, and you know what your gear sounds like, and you know what your microphone sounds like. And so it really kind of doesn't even matter what gear you're using. It's just that you're very familiar with it, and you've taken the time to know how far do I need to be? How do I need to set that up? How do I gain stage this properly, right? You've taken the time to know that. And to blow that up to a bigger degree, a really good engineer will have just done that a lot,
Right.
Like in a whole bunch of different rooms, a whole bunch of different environments, right? Like, so
It can hone in on that sound faster.
Yeah, well, there is something to be said about like instinct and stuff, but so much of good recording technique is trial and error and practice. Basically like playing an instrument too, so I know how I wouldn't approach miking a trombone or a vocalist because I will have screwed that up already. Like I will know what I don't like. I'll have tried it and it won't have worked.
Right. And so we're not doing that again.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of it is that way. And to that point, we were recording one show, and it was a jazz combo oriented show. And we got about halfway through the show and the session ended, and in reviewing the tracks, I wanted just a little bit more isolation on the snare microphone from the hi-hat, for example. And so Chris and I spent a little bit of time, and the only thing we changed was the position of the snare microphone, and it was within 2 inches of what it kind of always was, but it was able to mitigate and remove, enough of that hi-hat bleed to be much more usable. So like achieving that goal was moving the microphone, angling it very slightly differently, and tons of good engineering practices, small adjustment and refinement like that. It applies to everything. Acoustic guitar, really kind of anything.
Hey, you listen to a lot of different guitar recordings, and they don't all sound the same.
Yeah.
So, there's not necessarily a right answer.
Yeah.
But there's probably lots of wrong answers, I guess.
Yeah.
I've heard plenty of those.
Yeah. I guess if it's in terms of like what are the most egregious, maybe bad practices if you're new to recording or you're finding that your recordings aren't achieving what you want, my first guess, not even hearing or talking to someone, would almost always be that they're recording too loudly. Oftentimes people record too loud. If your gain is turned up on your preamp too much, you're capturing a lot of things that you don't necessarily want in terms of how your room sounds or how your clothes sound when you're shuffling and stuff like that. So, in terms of there being good practices implies that there's also bad practices, but it's really a trial and error, process. And mentorship and having guidance goes a really long way too, because I benefited while I was in school by having a teacher there who was really anxious to just like show someone everything that they knew, and I was really anxious to just like be in the room and be involved with that stuff. And so it ended up being very beneficial for me because we'd show up to something and be like, you could try this, you could try this, you could try this, you could try this, this might not work, but here's how I'm going to do it, here's why, listen, and then he just kind of like bugged off and let me go screw it up a whole bunch and then arrive to my own conclusions. And, that was really valuable.
I have to admit, most of my studio, not experience, but the more valuable experience came after school because they started to offer some recording studio stuff toward the end, and I was in full gear trying to get through it. And, my wife was pregnant at the time, and I remember I literally fell asleep in recording studio every day.
Right.
And it's very interesting. It was not.
I gotcha.
It was at the worst possible time of day. And I actually regretted for a long time, like, how I let a lot of that experience go, but it was just...
Right.
No,
I gotcha.
That particular period of my life, man, I was very I needed to be done with school. And
yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, that I, was working full-time in addition to the school and, kids and all that stuff. My wife was really sick with that last pregnancy the whole time, so there was a lot of so anyway, I was like probably the opposite of you. This night's optional. Okay, peace out.
I gotcha. I get what you're saying.
I gotta go make dinner.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you.
But since then I've done a lot of recording and kind of however, I do remember a lot of stuff. And a thing that at the time, I guess, that it was we were in a really amazing facility, and we were using gear that I was not going to be able to get my hands on anyway.
Right.
And
yeah, I get what you're saying.
I guess I don't know. Anyway, I want to take a quick moment to say this. Hey, like me, are you addicted to sheet music? Then let me tell you about Encoda. Encoda is an app that lets you practice, play, and perform your sheet music. It is a streaming service similar to Netflix and Spotify with tens of thousands of titles. That's millions of pages of sheet music available instantly at your fingertips. Subscribers have access to the finest editions from Boozy and Hawkes, Baron Ryder, Chester, Novello, and many, many more. And they have received praise from Sir Simon Rattle and Joyce D. Donato. And if you're not sure, you can sign up for a free trial. Download Encoda from your app store today. That's Encoda, Nkoda. And be sure to let them know that the Classical Guitar Composers Podcast sent you.
Is this a non-swearing podcast?
I do not mark it as explicit.
Yeah.
So.
You said prick, and I think you're pushing it, buddy.
Is prick a swear word?
No, I don't know. No.
I mean, I know it's maybe I'm just wondering, should I beep those out?
No. If you bleep the word prick out, everyone's going to think you say something way worse than prick.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So I don't think...
What did he call that guy?
Exactly. I don't think you should bleep it.
No,
I'm just being funny. No.
It's a family-friendly show.
Yeah, no, I'm just
We talk funny. About horror movies.
I'm just being funny. Yeah. Or trying, anyway.
Yeah, well, no, you're succeeding. I don't know. Everything's funny to me right now. I need some sleep. This is kind of like the end of school, and I'm in recording studio class.
Exactly.
No, this is way more fun.
You know,
Parker, what?
I'm excited for arriving at Friday night because I can just go to bed. Right? I'm gonna go to bed early tonight. And it's gonna be the best way of spending a Friday. I say that, but you know I'm an insomniac, so that's probably not gonna happen.
I have a
either.
feeling you're going to be working on some project tonight.
That's true. You already know what I'm going to be working on.
I shouldn't encourage it, but
yeah.
No, hey, you need to get that done, man.
Yeah.
One show we recently worked on was a musical called "We Will Rock You," which is a bunch of Queen songs.
I think it's all Queen music, isn't it?
It's all Queen music.
Yeah, they've crafted a whole storyline around all of the big Queen hits,
much like Mamma Mia.
Yeah,
and whatnot. So, I know you're a big Queen fan.
Yeah,
and I got to tell you, I've always liked Queen, but there comes a point where like Killer Queen comes on the radio and I change it.
Yeah,
I've heard it a lot. So I've always really respected Queen. They're a very talented band. I think Brian May's a great guitar player.
Yeah.
I've never been into them.
I got you.
However, when we did the show, I heard a lot of songs I've never heard before.
Yeah.
And they were really cool.
Yeah.
One song I really, really like that I did not know until we did the show was Innuendo.
Yeah.
That is such a cool song. So then I went back and listened to the original Queen Innuendo, which the entire thing is not included in the musical. I think that one has this killer acoustic guitar section, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So cool. Yeah. I want you to tell me some Queen songs because I have developed a new respect for Queen. And I'm wondering if you got any suggestions of a good rabbit hole to go down with Queen.
Well, my favorite stuff, it's kind of all over the place with Queen. And that's kind of why I like Queen. And you bring up a good point where Killer Queen comes online, comes on the radio or something, or something that's very, very familiar, like Bicycle or, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. And a lot of those...
We Will Rock You. I changed the show, or changed the channel automatically.
We Will Rock You. So, I think the
I will listen to We Are the Champions when a sports team I care about wins the championship.
Yeah.
And until then...
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I think you bring up a good point in that the things that are hailed as the top pedestal of Queen music in terms of their hits, I think are great. Admittedly, being a Queen fan, I do really like them. But I would say that there's so much in their discography that is very far removed from the things that they're most known for that have a lot more appeal. Innuendo is a great example, although that is, it
had a music video.
Yeah, really popular song.
I've never heard it.
They
don't play it on K-Bear.
Exactly. And a lot of people, don't know how much music Queen actually released. How many albums they actually made, just because, if you think of Queen, you could name, everyone could name, 5 songs, and they'd probably all be the same 5 songs, right? And Bohemian Rhapsody is at the very tippy top of the list, but even everything else on that album from Bohemian Rhapsody, so the love for Bohemian Rhapsody is completely warranted, in my opinion. I think it's an amazing song, but I think if someone were to listen from beginning to end to that album, they would not have the same connection with that album that they do with that single song. And that's where it's kind of interesting. The songs that there are 2 songs that stick out to me in particular as being ones that I absolutely adore. And it's for kind of funny, not really funny, but kind of weird reasons that are specific to me, but they also represent why I think Queen is so cool. One of them is the first time I heard this song was they have a Live in Montreal album, and it's a song that they perform on this tour, And in the recording, Freddie announces it like they're working on it. They're about to record it. This is one of the first times that they played it. And it's just an acoustic guitar playing and Freddie Mercury singing. It's called Love of My Life. An amazing song. It just like, when I first heard it, it just resonated with me immediately. And compared to everything that's like their huge, massive hits, just acoustic guitar, just vocal, it's incredible. And then you go listen to the album and it has insane vocal stackings. Like Freddie Mercury singing stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of vocals that now are kind of, they're taken for granted and that they're not that difficult to do. But at the time, mind-blowing at how he would have done those. And then the other song that I really, really love is from the movie Highlander. I don't know if you knew this, but Queen did the music for the movie Highlander.
I did know that. Yeah.
And number one, I love the movie Highlander for everything about it. I love everything about it. It's just Christopher Lambert. He's French, but he's playing an Irishman. What is his accent? Who knows? Who cares? Sean Connery's in it, and this is the movie that made him like not want to do sci-fi movies anymore. And he plays an Egyptian who's a Spaniard who fights with a katana. It's just incredible. But there's a song called "Who Wants to Live Forever" that Freddie Mercury kind of wrote while doing the production for Highlander, and the song doesn't actually end up in the movie, if I recall, but they ended up doing like a big it's definitely in the movie, but they ended up doing like a full like music video after, and the music video is gloriously cheesy.
Yeah, I do know this.
Yeah,
one.
I think I probably would have showed it.
Well,
to you.
this one's in "We Will Rock You."
Yeah,
so I looked it up for reference.
So "We Will Rock You" has it, and then also the movie that they made. But it's just called Bohemian Rhapsody, right? Rami Malek.
Oh yeah, the
like the kind of the biopic,
the recent thing.
Yeah. That they played a lot of like really awesome, like I call, they're not really deep cuts, but you know those songs were
they hit
in
the
that.
B-sides a little bit.
Yeah. So I really liked it.
I haven't seen that.
In terms of like that show has Hammerfall in it. Hammerfall is just a cool rock song.
Hammerfall is cool.
You know. But in terms of album, like, I think that a Queen experience would be to go listen to, like, Night at the Opera. Night at the Opera is a great album. They have an album called Jazz that has a bunch of their hits on it, but then a lot of the other songs that are on it that aren't, like, in their top 10 are also really, really good. And it's funny that it's named Jazz, and it's just, I mean...
You directed me to a really weird one once.
I did.
And I do not remember the name of it, but it had some very ethnic stuff going on.
I'm drawing a blank.
And I don't dare point it toward any. I mean, was there like a Hebrew type of thing?
Oh, Mustafa.
Yeah, that's gotta be it.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm saying that right. I'm pretty sure that's what it would have been.
I'm almost afraid to venture. I can't remember it well enough to say what was going on.
Mustafa. Yeah, that's probably it. Definitely. There's like a very like Hebrew like clarinet solo section and
it was not what I was expecting. It was pretty cool.
Exactly.
I was intrigued very much.
Yeah, because you think Queen, you go, okay, We Will Rock You, and you think of the kind of operatic elements in Bohemian Rhapsody, and then you find out that they've written things like Crazy Little Thing Called Love or Mustafa or like Radio Gaga, right? Like Radio Gaga is just kind of
okay. That's one I didn't know until we did the show.
It's just like
I really liked the song. I thought the words were just so stupid.
Yeah, I gotta say, same thing. Like, and then you know, just Another One Bites the Dust. You're right. Like contextually is like all of their hits are kind of just so far removed from one another.
Yeah.
And so
it is.
They're just like
pretty cool.
They're kind of a mashup band. You know,
something I've always struggled with Queen, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just doesn't land well with my ear. But it's the way they're very thick harmonized. When you're talking about those Freddie stacks, I don't know if that's, for example, in the song "Somebody to Love," I really like that song. I love that song.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily care for the constant background vocals.
Yeah.
And
there's
it's
a
very
lot of
saturated.
It's kind of call and response. And
and it is saturated.
The response element of it is like really dense.
So it's very dense. On top of that, there's kind of like a lot of falsetto type of sound. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
You know,
I gotcha. To each his own.
I've always struggled with that, and I know it's like part of their signature sound.
Yeah, well,
their vocals.
It became part of their signature sound, but they had a lot of music before that was even a thing. Like before that was something that they were pretty well known for. You know, because like those are the standout ones. Yeah, because you got like the really high.
They got really into
falsetto.
to doing vocal layers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't change that song when it comes.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for the sappy ballad type of.
Yeah. I hear you.
Well, that's cool. All right, I'm gonna look into what was the first song you named again? Because I have heard "Who Wants to Live Forever" many times. What was that other one? The acoustic guitar and Freddie.
"Love of My Life."
"Love of My Life."
Yeah.
I'm gonna check that out.
Look at it specifically on that album. It's
I will.
live in Montreal, 1972. It's a really, really well recorded and mixed album. And Queen also has released a whole bunch of their albums live, and they're incredible. I tend to gravitate towards, if I love a band, I want to go listen to their live albums. And I find that the bands that I love the most are the ones that have really killer live albums. And it's just something that I love. I love to hear a band that can just really play well live.
You realize that you're talking to a deadhead.
You're a deadhead. Yeah, I knew that. So that and you introduced me to Little Feat, and
yeah,
I had never listened to a band like that. And the album that you referred me to is a live album, and I've since fallen in love with that album.
Yeah,
you know,
that's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah, so that album especially is a standout, excellent one, and you can find it anywhere. You know,
my wife and I once had a discussion about like if you were going to attempt to turn someone into a Grateful Dead fan, like what is their quintessential album? What album do you hand them and say, listen to this, and if you love it,
then you'll like the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, if you hate it, then we can't be friends. Like,
oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
No, I'm just kidding. But like, you know, what is and we, you know, we both kind of had the same top two choices, but both favored that. So hers was American Beauty, which is that you cannot argue against American Beauty being their best album.
Right.
Yeah.
I got you.
And you can't argue with like, this is the Grateful Dead. If you want somebody to know what the Grateful Dead are, like here is the root of this band. This is the core of this band,
right.
And it all stems from music like this. I've more favored Europe '72, which is a live album.
Yeah, we pull up that album for reference when we were calibrating and setting up the
you asked me
the new studio.
Yeah, Ramble on Rose.
Yeah,
my favorite Grateful Dead song. Hey Scott, do you have a favorite Grateful Dead song? I'm curious. But yeah, I think Europe '72 is the one I would say.
I guess 72 is a killer year because Montreal Live 72 for Queen is my favorite Queen album.
Oh, yeah,
there must have been something magical about 72. Wouldn't it be hilarious if that Little Feat album was released in 1972 as well?
It could be. I have no idea. I don't know.
A good year.
Real deep.
Really good
Well, it's
year.
a transitional period for the Grateful Dead at this time. They're, yeah, it's just a nice.
Yeah.
It's just nice.
I hear you.
All right, and I know you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
We're jumping subjects now.
Yeah.
But
the context in the short story would be that you and another one of our coworkers have like just this burning love for horror movies, and it's intense. And you guys have like power rankings of like the Halloween franchise and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchises, and it's evolving and it's changing. And I don't necessarily feel left out of that, but I mentioned that I wanted to dip the toe in watching some of those movies, and so we have watched some of those movies, mainly Stephen King, really. I mean, we watched Changeling, which is not a Stephen King movie, which I really, really liked.
Fantastic movie.
Yeah, amazing movie. Yeah. I knew nothing about it going into it. It was just the right amount of spooky, extremely well made. It's got a lot of really cool sound design elements in it that
He's
are
talking
awesome.
about it's from like 1980.
Oh,
the
yeah.
horror movie. We're not talking the Angelina Jolie.
No. And it's just such a cool premise. This composer.
Oh yeah, I talked about this on the podcast.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
because it's a composer horror.
If you
movie.
haven't seen it, it's so great, and it's not gross. It's like it's not gory, anything like that. I think
Safe
it's
for work.
Is it a PG-13?
No, it's R, but
It's R.
by today's standards,
It's
not really.
pretty soft PG-13
Yeah.
by today's
There's
standards.
no,
it would have come out in like the 70s.
There's no naked ladies. There's no, there's probably not even a lot of swearing, if any.
Yeah.
So
I don't remember anything.
It's really not. It doesn't have a
It
lot
would
of
have been
the things that would normally make your horror movie R. It's not gory. It's just kind
it's
of
spooky.
It's scary. Yeah,
and it's really good.
Yeah.
So we have we watched the new Halloween movie, but in preparation for that, my wife and I watched the original Halloween, which I had seen before. She hadn't seen it. Anyway, so we watched Halloween. We watched a couple other movies, and then we're gonna watch It. And the reason we watched It is because It Chapter 2 was going to be released on Blu-ray, and our coworker, like, he loves It. It's like he loves the movies. This iteration of the movies he really likes. I don't know what his opinion is of the book necessarily, but I just know he loves these movies.
He hasn't read the book, I don't think, but
gotcha.
And he hates the miniseries, I believe.
Yeah, hates the miniseries, but he loves.
He has like an
movies.
Unhealthy love for these movies.
So,
I said to him today, I said, I need a reason to get you on the podcast. And he's like, why? I said, well...
So you can argue about It.
I said, I know Parker wants to defend it a little bit. I know your defense would be extremely passionate, but...
My position on it is positive moderate.
Okay.
You know, like, and the thing I want to talk about is probably the reason that, like, it doesn't get a shining endorsement from me. Well, first off,
you liked it though, right?
Yeah, I did like it. I did enjoy it, but it made me. I think it made me feel how it's exactly supposed to make you feel, like kind of like slimy and oozy and gross and like sad, you know, because it's about him just terrorizing kids and feeding off their fear and all that stuff. So, yes, I did like it, and I do like it. I think. Man, Skarsgård, who plays It,
he was fantastic.
Like supremely creepy. Like
he was fantastic. Yeah,
I
will give
am so unnerved by him in that role. It was like perfect, and I am also endeared to the fact that it's like a really crass and sweary version of the Goonies, and so like that's gonna kind of win me over because I. Yeah, that's a big...
Me too.
Yeah,
Me too. I love nothing more than swearing children.
Yeah.
The
my only review of Goonies is that it would need way more like accurate, appropriate 13 and 14-year-old cursing, and it kind of hits
was appropriate in the 80s.
Yeah.
The Goonies. Okay, wait, hang on now. We got. The Goonies is like.
Yeah.
I have not like made a list of my favorite movies, but Goonies is. Yeah. Battling for the top spot. It might have it.
Yeah. You've
those kids remind me of me and my friends to a certain degree.
Right.
And so do the kids in Stranger Things to a certain degree.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has that element. And you know what I said to Jeremy after it?
What?
I saw it. I said I liked it better when it was called Stranger Things, and he completely. He's not here to defend it. I liked it better when he's got a defense for this, and I'm not acknowledging it.
Oh, I see. I see.
You can come on the show.
Yeah, an epic episode of It argument.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They even used the kid from Stranger Things.
Yeah. Ultimately, I ended up enjoying it. And I liked Chapter 1 more than Chapter 2.
Really?
Yep. Okay. By a pretty, I would say, a good stretch. I liked it more. And that's not the, I thought the casting in the second was like eerily and spooky good in terms of like having those adults and kids well cast
some of
against
them
each
looked
other.
Like the kids.
Yeah.
A couple of them.
That was really, really, really
I think Ben
impressive.
Particularly. I was like, that is the most believable adult.
Yep.
Version of the kid actor I've ever seen.
Well, and Stan too. I mean,
Stan was perfect.
He's only in it, right? Because, but like, man, it just seems like he literally just like smash cut to 30 years later, 27 years later, right? Where it's like, wow,
it was really.
So the thing that stands out is like the big issue for me, the bugaboo about the whole thing, is, and I haven't read the book, right? So I'm claiming and acknowledging my ignorance of it, right? But this is why I've come to consult the master. So, so this is going to be spoilers, right? Obviously, it's going to be spoilers.
Yeah.
About It and It Chapter 2.
All right.
So,
So warning here, Parker and I are capable of jumping in at any time about any movie
yeah.
and spoiling it. So
Yeah.
if you haven't seen it,
This will
or
definitely
The
be
Rise of Skywalker, or
yeah.
Attack of the I don't know.
This will definitely
talking
be
about
spoilers
Attack of the
for it, and there's no way of knowing where it'll go.
Yeah.
Because we do tangents sometimes, at least in our conversations outside of the podcast.
Yeah.
So
I
the
think the podcast is over.
Oh yeah.
No. I mean we've gone. We're past recording talk now.
Yeah, I gotcha. We segued out of that, but you led
Hold
the
on.
charge on that.
I gotta don't just turn it off if you don't want spoilers. Fast forward to the end. Listen to the music.
Yeah,
That's
good plug there. Good plug there.
Okay.
This is an opportunity for your listeners to get to know more about you, right? And that's what I appreciate that in the podcast that I listen to.
I do too.
Okay.
And you too.
Yeah.
Just learn about this co-host who likes it. Okay.
So the thing for me that stands as a discrepancy is how does Stan know enough when he gets the letter? He gets the letter, or is it the phone call from Mike?
Phone call.
It's a phone call, and he writes a letter. Okay, yeah. He gets a phone call from Mike, and Mike's like, you guys need to come back. And everyone kind of has like this, like, oh, crap, I have to go back thing. But like they don't even remember that Pennywise exists until they're at the Chinese restaurant and they're having the conversation, right? There's like a moment where one of them goes, like stops and like looks into the distance, like it's just a faint little glimmer of a memory, and is like Pennywise, right? And then Pennywise like terrorizes them at the dinner as it starts to come back to them. But if they don't remember the specifics of Pennywise at all until they're in the town together, how does Stan recall or know enough to know that he has to, because he has to kill himself because he knows that they'll have to be unified in order to win against Pennywise in the final thing? Like, I guess where he's like, he's away, he's married, he has a life, getting the phone call and everyone else not being able to remember really any of the details, but for him to know at least enough that would justify him taking such a severe action. Do you know what I mean? Not even just not going.
I gotcha.
But killing himself. So this is the thing that kind of stuck out to me as being difficult to navigate in terms of the arc of the whole story, where like he ends up being, in many ways, kind of like this final sacrificial hero. He kind of makes it happen because he, in the context of the letter, says that like, I knew what it would take to defeat him. I knew that I wouldn't be able to do that. I had to remove myself from the equation. But how would he have? I guess it seems I'm skeptical that without the specific memories, he would be able to commit so much to the cause, like basically in the dark, I guess. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think the movie reconciles that.
In the book, I don't think there's any, like, noble sacrifice.
Okay.
He's just afraid.
Interesting.
So
they changed that for the movie then?
They changed a lot for the movie.
Right.
But judging the movie on the merits of the movie, not from the book.
I assumed it was something like that.
They all can remember something's bad. Like, this is bad. They kind of remember, oh, yeah.
And they absolutely don't want to go back.
They know that they don't want this.
Yeah.
So Stan's experience as a kid, he's just, if I remember right, it's been a while since I read the book, but he was not able to handle it as well as the others.
Okay.
Like, it just, and he had to, it seems like he walked through fear probably more than anybody and just couldn't do it again.
Gotcha.
Like, there could be something wrong, but I don't remember any kind of like, it
like
was not like you guys won't be complete.
Yeah.
If I'm there, I'll be the weakling. I don't think there's anything like that. It's like, no, I'm not going back.
Gotcha. Okay, because like Bill, that makes sense because Bill has like just this natural like resiliency.
Yeah, he's got that leadership.
He can like
quality
leadership
to
and
him.
kind of bullhead his way through it. And Stan's definitely not that way.
The book, yeah, okay.
Because in the movie, if I remember the letter right, Stan very much like blatantly lays out the fact that like he says something akin to like, I knew you'd have to be united, and I knew that he prays on fear.
I'm pretty sure there is no letter in the book.
Okay, okay. Well, that That clears up a whole lot for me. Unfortunately, because
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
Number one,
that...
I ended up liking. So when my first reaction to the letter and them reading it and the reveal that Stan like chose to do that as like not really like a contributing or necessarily a sacrifice. He just like it seemed like he was clued into the bigger picture enough to know that it would be a problem if he went. And so my first reaction was like, oh, that's like. I really like that. And then I thought about it for like 5 minutes and I was like, but wait, this is like a gigantic plot hole, a huge plot hole as to how he would know to do that. But if there is no letter and he's just like super terrified and refuses to go back or doesn't want to go back, I mean, that paints him in a different context where he may not be thriving or doing as well. They give no context about what's going on with his life, you know, except in the movie, like they show his wife and they talk to his wife on the phone.
Yeah.
That he would have killed himself and stuff like that.
The book certainly gives the background of his life.
Okay. I think I probably... I need
Let
to
me
read
tell
the
you
book.
something about...
If I read the book, am I going to hate the movies? I don't
know, because in retrospect, if you liked the movie first...
that's kind of how it goes.
I like the miniseries. I saw the miniseries before I read the book.
I also enjoy the miniseries.
Yeah.
But it's been a really long time since I watched it.
The miniseries was notoriously complained about for being so far from the book. It's closer to the book than the new one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm led to believe, and we don't have to get into the weeds on this. We'll save it for a different podcast. But I think the same is true for you, certainly, regarding Dr. Sleep, where, like, in the
I'm
whole
fuming angry about Dr. Sleep still.
In the grand scheme of like the Stephen King universe, in the movies they poke fun at Bill for like having a really poor ending to his movies.
Oh right,
his books, right?
Yeah.
And
it's
that
like
seems a very tongue-in-cheek thing about Stephen King.
Yeah.
So I caught that, but then additionally, it seems like it is very polarizing about like because you're a Stephen King fan. Jeremy is a huge Stephen King fan. Our coworker's a huge Stephen King fan.
And we are at odds about Dr. Sleep.
You are so at odds. You are so complete opposite in terms of enjoyment or hatred of Dr. Sleep. And again, I kind of end up being like a derpy middle guy who like hasn't read any Stephen King but liked The Shining and loved Dr. Sleep. And after I saw Dr. Sleep, liked the movie The Shining even more, you know.
I'm all worked up right now.
I know. I shouldn't have brought it up.
No, it's okay.
I'll have to read the book.
I want to talk about this.
I'll have to read the book first.
Let me tell you about Stephen King. Let me tell you about Stephen King.
Tell me about Steve.
I love Stephen King, but no one loves Stephen King more than Stephen King.
There's a lot going on. He has musicals, he has movies, he has books, he has HBO series.
Busy guy.
Stephen King's got a lot happening right now. He even cameos in his own movies now.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't mean to prick the bear, but I kind of knew it was coming because
No. This is my favorite. Some of my favorite things to talk about. The book It is a really, really good book that suffers from just Stephen King loving some Stephen King.
Is it too long?
It's too long. It's unnecessarily long.
Okay.
I would contrast it with The Stand, which is also extremely long. The Stand is probably longer.
I have also not read that.
Okay. So
I only read the first Dark Tower book, and I didn't know it was a Stephen King book. And I liked it, and I started the second one, but then I was like, oh, dang, this is a pretty big series.
There's like 20 of these.
Yeah, and I was already in the middle of something else that's bigger, so I was like, okay, I'll pause that later. So I have no context of how the books compare to the movies.
So I haven't seen The Stand. I need to. So the concept of it, the monster itself, it's one of my favorite monsters of all time.
Right.
I just love the conception.
Is the origin of Pennywise in the movie accurate to what it is in the book?
I don't even remember what they did in the movie.
I'll tell you what they do in the movie.
Okay.
He's like an alien. Like they show like this. They show like this vision of like this thing falling from the sky, and it's like this big monster that's terrorizing the Native Americans.
What? I can't
imprison Pennywise.
No, that's okay. That's right. No.
No? Oh, okay, so that's not the origin of Pennywise.
He might be... Well, okay, Steven doesn't... He gets so freaking weird by the end of it that you're like, whatever. It turns into Discworld. Like, you know Discworld books by Terry Pratchett?
Yeah.
Best reads ever. I love Discworld.
Yep.
There's a flying turtle in it, okay?
Yeah.
Flying through space.
Okay.
And I can't picture it without there being 4 elephants on its back.
Okay.
But yeah, it gets weird. It is essentially some kind of ancient evil entity that its true form is called the Deadlights,
Right.
Which they cannot. It gets so weird. It'd be everyone always complains about the way It movies end, how they kill Pennywise at the end. Well, they can't put this into film. It's just too. I mean,
So he dies differently in the books.
yeah.
Okay, I gotta read the book now. Dang it! I should
Okay,
be more
let me warn you
prepared
about the
for
book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it. It is very good. He just likes to go on some tangents, and this book goes to a place I don't like.
Yeah, I think I'm aware of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's hard to. That comes up a lot, just in terms of
it's the number one criticism of the book. I think nobody likes that part. Nobody understands. Here's the other thing about it.
I'm aware
there
that
is no reason for it to be there.
I'm aware that it's a thing.
It, in fact, contradicts the whole arc of all these character stories because he claims they needed this experience to help them mature into the next, get past all this, right? And I'm like, well, what about the experience of being terrorized by this evil clown entity for that they, as a group of kids, managed to overcome their fears and defeat this thing with their bravery? Yeah, and then they had to. Yeah. Oh no, it couldn't be completed until they.
You don't have to talk about it, but I'm aware that that's a thing, and I can reconcile either skipping that or just acknowledging that it will be a thing and being like,
whatever. I mean,
in terms of the pacing and it being long, I'm really not deterred by that at all. I mean, you know that I'm on like book 7 of the Dune series right now, so I can commit. I can commit, Chris.
Gosh, you're making my ADD go off. Okay, let's stay on this for a second.
Okay.
I love Dune. Okay.
Yeah.
Contrast it with The Stand is also extremely long, and I feel like The Stand it flows really well, and there's nothing I'd really take out. There is one. There's like a long, uncut version of The Stand, which is the one I read. And when I read what was the addition to that version, I could have lived without it.
Okay.
I think let the editor do their job, Stephen, is what I say.
Right.
It has some extra weight that just feels unnecessary. That makes it kind of a slog. That's otherwise a really cool book.
Okay.
And then some weird stuff. But Dr. Sleep, I think, it is by far my favorite Stephen King book, and it does not suffer from any of those things. Everything in the book feels necessary to the story, and it's eerie. It's cool. I enjoyed the entire thing.
Right.
And even that horrific scene with the baseball kid,
right?
Which they in the movie in the book it was just like that.
A grizzly.
I did feel like it helped the book. Then it was more necessary to the book than the movie.
I gotcha. I get what you're saying.
I love Dr. Sleep, the book, and the movie. So I know they're going to change movies. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm not upset at what they changed for the movie It necessarily. Some of it, it's like, why? You know,
right?
But I don't really care that much because they just do. Movies never accurately.
So would you say that the movie for Dr. Sleep also changed things unnecessarily, or if they had been more truer to the book, it would be a better movie?
Okay, well, yes. However, to make it a sequel to The Shining, the movie, they had to change the book.
Oh, okay.
It could not work because the original, the Jack Nicholson Shining movie, which Stephen King hated, had a pretty significant change from the book, extremely significant, and they wanted this movie is a sequel to both
the book and the movie somehow.
Yeah,
right?
It like reconciles them into one. So they had to make some pretty big changes. So
okay,
what can I spoil?
Don't spoil anything. I'm gonna read it.
Okay,
I know I'm gonna read it.
Then I'm not gonna spoil anything.
We'll have a follow-up.
I will tell you this:
where I'll have read it.
The changes that were necessary to make it fit into the movie didn't bother me at all. In fact, that was my favorite part of the movie.
Okay.
The unnecessary changes absolutely pissed me off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I can't tell you what those are.
That makes a lot of sense.
Book.
We'll have a follow-up episode when I've read it, because I'm at the tail end of what I'm reading now, and I'm looking for the next thing to dig into.
My wife, she finished Dr. Sleep right before we went to the movie.
Okay.
Because I was like, you're going to like this. You should read this book. And she's like, well, should I before we see the movie? And I said, yeah, because there's no way the movie is going to live up to this book.
So
she came back.
Gotcha.
And I was like, she sent me a text when she finished it, and I was like, there's no chance she's going to like this movie. Because she said it was a perfect book.
Oh, and so when she went to see it, did she have the same response? Not like the movie?
She hated the movie more than me.
Ah, okay.
I was, my initial thing was, well, that was a fun movie. I was, whatever. I liked this about it, whatever. But the more I thought about it, like, no,
Yeah.
I don't even ever want to see it again. I'd rather read the book again. And I rarely read book twice. But
I gotcha.
She was not so slow to develop hatred for it. She, was angry. She was distraught after the movie about how stupid it was.
It makes me want to read it just so I can know what the hubbub is about.
Well, here's the thing. Jeremy has read it.
Yeah.
However, I know he's read it long ago. He read it when Stephen King wrote it, just 2013 or something.
Yeah.
So he probably doesn't remember a lot of the details or whatever that would bother. But I'm not mad about details. I'm mad about I don't feel like I would have liked it. I probably would have liked it more if I hadn't read it and then read the book. I don't know if because it's like Jurassic Park. It's one of my favorite movies. I read the book after I saw the movie.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
But man, that movie's so far from the book.
Yeah.
That I imagine a lot of people were probably really
I get what you're saying.
unhappy.
Had you read the book and then seen the differences, you'd be able to go why change that?
When I read the book, I asked myself, I'm like, be honest, would you have liked the movie? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I might have hated it because I was hoping for this, but having seen the movie first, the book doesn't make me not love the movie.
It's similar with me.
They're great. They're both great.
Yeah, it's similar with my opinion versus my uncle Burke's opinion about Lord of the Rings. We both love the books.
Yeah.
I love the movies. He thinks they're an abomination. he loathes them. And
Yeah.
for me, there's a pure acknowledgement of knowing where those changes were made and feeling like they were just great. I love the movies. I thought the movies were great. But he stabbed right in the heart. So upset at a ton of things.
Yeah.
With the Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Those
Lord of the Rings people that the way they feel about the movie, the ones that are the book loyalists that that's Aaron's reaction to Dr. Sleep.
Oh, okay. No, I can now picture it where it's I totally get that.
An abomination.
Yeah. This is the worst. How dare they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which a lot of the arguments he makes, I think are very reasonable, 100% reasonable. But
I'll tell you,
I just compartmentalize it and go, they're different.
Yeah, me too. I love the movies.
Yeah.
I like the books. Okay. I don't love the books as much as a lot of people.
Yeah.
But
that's another point too.
But
I like
them.
I'm at the ceiling of at the at the floor of love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
That's fair. Yeah.
He all the way up. He's bouncing on the ceiling of how much he loves them, and it's awesome. And he's also dug into all the other supplementary material as well. He's the most knowledgeable,
the Silmarillion and stuff.
Yeah, beyond that too, because I've also read the Silmarillion, which is good, but even beyond that, he is a Lord of the Rings scholar. It's really impressive, but man, you don't want to get caught off guard with him.
Then the movies probably would upset him.
Yeah.
I can understand.
Yeah, because there's even things that are in the movie that mean absolutely nothing to me that have huge ramifications for how they connect to what happened 1,000 years earlier to characters I didn't even know exist or something,
Yeah.
And ultimately, though, at the end of the day, regardless of my opinion or his opinion, I think it's really cool that it's fleshed out to that degree and that you can even have the fandom developed that much. So, yeah.
Let me tell you something about Dr. Sleep, because I think it's a little different for me than something that deep, right? That it's not a fandom. It's not that kind of a reaction. But what you have in horror a lot is there's a lot of sadness in horror. I'm not someone who likes a sad drama. I like good horror. I like crappy horror. I like a lot. I mean, okay. I just like scary things. I always have since I was a little kid, man.
Yeah.
I like anything that scares me. But the sadness in horror movies doesn't hit me in the same way it does in a sad drama, right?
I gotcha.
Okay, so I felt like Dr. Sleep was an extremely sad movie. Okay, it was creepy and all that, and that's cool. But I guess what what I struggled with, and especially my wife, was that the book is not a sad book. I'll just put it that way.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, there's sad parts
Right.
or whatever, but the book, it really, I felt like, leaves you with a very positive feeling about the world and life, the universe, and everything.
Gotcha.
And the movie gave me the exact opposite feeling.
I
So
see.
that's where the movie fails for me. It's not
Interesting.
so much that it's different from the book or that they changed this or that, but I do feel like they ought to be
tonally,
delivering
it's
the
different.
same impact.
I get what you're
You
saying.
know?
So the discrepancy is a lot. Like those other
polar
things are
opposite.
certainly there, but like the tone,
Polar
is
opposite
captured
taste in my
differently.
mouth at the end.
Okay, I get what you're saying now.
So, aside from that, I loved the casting. I loved the acting. I thought Ewan McGregor was great, and I loved Rose the Hat.
Yeah.
Can't think of the actress's name. Rebecca something.
Mm-hmm.
She was awesome.
Yep.
She was incredible. Just don't like the movie. So
Yeah. I understand. It makes sense. I mean, we'll have to do a follow-up when I've read it. Because
yeah,
I'm convinced that I'm going to. If there's ones to dive into, I want to read it, and I want to read Doctor Sleep just so I can have better context of the nuances of your arguments with Jeremy. It will help fill in the gaps, at least just on that.
yeah.
Because there's some passion in those arguments that is just hard to describe. But
And you'll have the backwards approach with Doctor Sleep, and having seen the movie, and maybe you can separate the two better than I can. Maybe it'll be like Jurassic Park for you, or like, yeah, the book was good, but dude, the movie was awesome.
Yeah.
Like,
I think there's probably something to be said about that. If you watch the movie first and then you read the book, you're probably able to be more forgiving of the movie versus having read the book first and then read the movie, or read the book first and then watch the movie. You know?
I think definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because your lens of objectivity is kind of skewed differently.
That's why I try to really think honestly about Jurassic Park. What would my reaction be? I don't know. I think
By the
there's
way,
a good chance I hate that movie, though, if I had read that book first.
That was, just to break the fourth wall here, one of my favorite sentences ever. It's like, if I have to think objectively about Jurassic Park. Is that what you said? Was it objectively?
Probably.
We'll have to...
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, if I have to think honestly
If I have to attempt some
Jurassic
honest
Park,
thinking.
I immediately forgot what you said because I was so enamored with the fact that you had said it. Because it's like, if I really have to break down the emotional crisis inside me and the dilemma about Jurassic Park, it's deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to get off your chest?
Off my chest? No.
All right.
Not really. I mean, I guess I would be interested to know if, Chris and I could talk all day long. We have a lot of interest in the things that we don't have interest in. We both find also intriguing, so we could chat all day about this. So I appreciate the opportunity and platform to just nerd out about stuff like that. But I would be interested if your viewers found or find the talking about, production or recording useful, and if they had any like specific questions in terms of advice regarding technical aspects in terms of gear, like what to buy, what would be reliable in different price ranges, and or specifics on other techniques and stuff. If that's something, just for my own curiosity, that is seen as beneficial, I'd like to know. And if not, we could just focus on it and all the other stuff more. More. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
I think it's cool you have a platform and you have like building a community and they're like engaged and interested.
Yeah, please email me if you do have questions or comments to Parker or about the episode. You guys know how the deal is.
Yeah.
Anything you got to say, but I will definitely be having you on again if you're okay with it.
Yeah, I mean,
like this.
I always love nerding out about gear and recording and all that, and also, whatever we're interested in the moment.
Yeah, I like this. I think we're going to do this once in a while. Like I say, if those of you who don't like this and you're like, where's my show? This is not... Chill out. Next episode will be normal.
Like one in every 20 episodes or something.
Well, I don't make that many episodes.
No,
man,
5.
I want to talk to you more often than that. Yeah. But
at the risk
maybe
of
a couple
pissing off
times a
your
year,
readers.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know. I don't know what their reaction is.
Yeah. If they just don't say anything, then you do what you want.
The listeners are going up, so the count on each episode gets bigger. Cool. And then the old episodes are constantly being listened to.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so somebody's listening.
You're finding your people, classical guitar composers.
Oh, they're out there. They're out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never, I don't go to things, you know what I mean? So, like, there is, like, you know, there's a classical guitar society around. I'm not a get-involved type of guy. Let me put it that way.
Well, you're doing it on your own terms. You're a getting involved guy, but you're introverted. You want to do it in your own way. So you're getting involved and you're putting it on the internet so you can do it all in the safety and comfort of your own home.
Yeah, with a glass of iced tea.
Exactly.
And,
Which is a bummer. We didn't have the iced tea.
Your studio has a severe lack of iced tea.
It's true.
Next time I come over...
I used to have a lot of iced tea, but not recently.
Yeah. I wonder if there's yesterday I just found out was International Pipe Smoking Day.
Yeah, you told me about that today.
I missed it. And
you missed it by one day.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not too late, right? I wonder if there's an iced tea day.
So Chris and I had to get set up for this recording session 2 days ago. What day is it today? It would have been Wednesday.
Oh, yeah, Wednesday.
And it was picturesque. Our studio is our door faces like our parking lot where we park, but then right outside that there's like a lake and a golf course, and it's been so frigid cold. But we had like a full day of work, and then we were coming back in the afternoon, evening to get ready for this session. So we both I go home and go get some food with the family, and I drive up and I'm listening to an audiobook, and I walk up to the door, and then I hear Chris say something to me, like, and I pull my headphones out and I turn out, and the dude is like, he's like reclined sitting with his leg up against a tree, smoking a pipe, like watching the sunset over this lake / golf course. And it was like, first off, I don't know.
Life is beautiful.
There's no reason for anyone to have described you. I think if I'm the only other person who's been on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Chris is...
I'm going to say this real quick. I know other guitarists. I could have guitarists on the podcast, but you all know how to play guitar.
Yeah.
Like, I think it'd be more helpful. Sorry.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. But I don't know...
This isn't a guitar playing technique show. There are other shows for that. There are other shows.
I'm sure there are people who are listening who know you in real life, right? As I do.
Uh-huh.
But for those of you who don't know who Chris is, like, he is one of my favorite people to describe to other people. Because number one, we're buds. We're friends. There are things that we have in common, like, that we talk about, that, like, things we had in common long before we met, like, this burning love for Dune. We can talk all day about Star Wars. There are things that we share in terms of musical taste, but ultimately we also have very different tastes in terms of music. But again, we find what I find what Chris is interested in pretty interesting. So,
likewise.
The more I've gotten to know Chris, the funnier he is to describe to people. So I was talking to... I'm really good friends with both my uncles, Sam and Burke. I mean, they're like brothers, they're like friends, so I talk to them regularly. And I was like, you gotta meet this guy I work with. And they're like, why? It's like, first off, he's got a ponytail and a beard, okay? Shaves it into a goatee when it's warm outside. The dude loves to disc golf. He has a Grateful Dead tattoo. And he's a classically trained guitarist and composer. And they're like, this is wild. It's like, he loves Dune, he drinks sweet tea, and we...
No, whoa. Unsweetened.
Unsweetened, yes, sorry. He drinks unsweetened tea. This is a very specific thing. And I was like, and he smokes a cigar while we disc golf. He's like the coolest guy. And then when I was talking to Chris, and I was like, so what got you into disc golf? He's like, well, I actually liked real golf, but it was too expensive. And then find out he would, like, go in, was it sandals or flip-flops or just barefoot? I can't remember what you said.
Yeah, for real golfing?
For real golfing.
I would wear a pair of sandals and then take them off on the course.
So barefoot golfing with his shirt off, like tucked into his back pocket. And, it's just...
That's how it's meant to be played.
It's just some of my favorite things. Like, he treats himself to a cigar while we disc golf. And we talk about Dune and how he... both hates and loves Deadheads. It's like, you're an enigma, and I love it. It's so funny.
Oh, yeah.
Funny in every endearing good way, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
It's not a poke fun thing. You're just like...
It's pretty accurate.
Yeah. And I was like, and he has power rankings for his favorite horror movie franchises, and they change. They change all the time.
Yeah, I'm not locked into one thing.
Yeah.
I'm willing to be persuaded to the other side.
And anytime a new Halloween movie comes out, the power rankings all have to change because the context of all of them change or
Yeah.
Well, I really like it when you have occasion to bring me on your podcast. So
Yeah, thanks for doing it. It's been fun.
Yeah. Cool, man. I guess now after enduring all of this horrible talk between us, they'll enjoy a really awesome piece of music, right?
Yeah. Not having the audio queued up, I think Andrew had written a prelude.
Oh, nice.
But we'll find out for sure. So when I get home, I'm going to add it in.
Very cool.
Little behind the scenes peek here.
Yeah. What's to come?
Yeah.
Nice.
No, I had it right here in my back pocket.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, well, thanks, Parker.
Yep.
This has been really fun. I would like any reaction that the audience has.
And really,
I welcome it.
If the true reaction is like,
I hate it.
We hate this. This sucks. We're here for a classic guitar. Number one, will not take offense because I get to have conversations like this with Chris all the time.
Yeah, if you do feel that way, email it. I am going to read it on the next episode, either way. So.
Oh man, maybe my last episode on here would just be reading terrible reviews of my episodes. Yeah, and I would find that I would find that pretty funny because I understand how wild it is that you're making a Guitars Composers podcast, and then we always end up talking about horror movies and talked about Queen, and I'm sure there are people. Hopefully, there's like-minded people who have as weird or diverse interests, but if not, totally understandable.
Yeah, I try to talk a little more guitar on the normal episode, but I mean, how much can you talk guitar? I guess if I brought on another classical guitarist, we could go on about like what the best Mertz piece is, or
you brought up a good point though when you're like, if you brought another guitarist, but your audience are people who are they already play guitar. You know what I mean? It's an interesting point because there are other podcasts that cover these bases.
This is the only one that features your music, guys.
There you go. Yeah,
and it's definitely the only one where you get this kind of supreme content. Celebrity guests, local guests, friends. No, I was not you. I was talking about that time Ozzy Osbourne was on my podcast.
I didn't know that was a thing. Okay, well, good. I was confused.
Yeah, we're old buds. He was in town. Yeah. All right, thanks, Parker.
Yep,
it's been a pleasure.
Yep. Till next time.
Appreciate your time. Yeah. All right, and now let's move to the final portion of the podcast that is the reason I know you're all here. And it is time to push pause. Get yourself that glass of iced tea. You've probably had to refill a couple times at this point. But and let's check out this piece from Andrew Aylward, featured earlier on episode 6, making an appearance again. Thank you, Andrew, for your email and for this piece and being a listener. I really appreciate it. And enjoy. And there it is. We've just heard music by Andrew Aylward, and I hope you have enjoyed this show today. I want to thank you very much for joining me. I want to especially thank my guest, Parker Robinson. And until next time, keep on plucking.